So, you've been learning your poi the past few months, you've been getting your tricks down, and you want to take that big leap. How do you know that you're ready to spin fire? Drex here from DrexFactor.com, and today I am answering that most popular of online questions. When am I ready to spin fire? Before we dive in, I just want to give a quick shout out to the friends of the channel. Big thanks to Dark Monk, Flow Toys, Pyroterra Light Toys, LMF Props, Spinballs, and Ultrapoi for helping to make the videos on this channel possible. You can learn more about all these amazing companies and the work that they're doing to support flow artists like yourself by checking out the links that I've got down in the description of this video. So let's be real here. Quite a lot of us, myself included, got into the flow art specifically because we saw somebody spinning fire with it, and we were thinking, I want to do that myself. But like, when am I ready to do that? When do I have enough tricks under my belt? When am I safe enough? What do I need to know? Oh goodness! Calm down, I'm here to help. It's actually kind of a good thing to be anxious about this because it means that you're more likely to take proper care in doing something that is kind of dangerous. But there are things that I think help prepare you. So today I'm going to pass those on to you. So this is my checklist of the 5 things that you need to start spinning fire. Please make sure to like, share, subscribe, comment, share, all of that good stuff to make sure that other people can find this video too, yeah? So first up, you really need to have a basic knowledge of fire safety. This is something that didn't exist in an organized form when I first started spinning about 13 or 14 years ago, and something that I kind of had to learn the ropes of in the process of spinning. And this actually led to quite a few situations where I was doing things that were really unsafe and putting both myself and others at risk. But fortunately, there's a better approach now. So item number 1 on this course is going to be taking the fire safety course from the Flow Arts Institute, which I'm going to link to down in the description. This is going to include so much information that is going to be so helpful to you in your journey. You'll find out what the best fuels are for spinning fire with, what the best practices are for dipping and for fire safety spotters, plus which you'll get some information about what to do if things go wrong. Seriously, this is your first and most important port of call. Make sure that you are as educated as you can be before you light up for the first time. Take the course, you'll thank me later. Now this was kind of buried in the last point, but it's something that I really want to emphasize as its own item on this checklist because it's more important than you realize, and that is having a fire safety spotter. A lot of the time we call these people just safeties for short. Basically, this is a person whose responsibility is to watch you the entire time that you are spinning fire and be ready with a fire safety blanket or to help out if anything goes wrong. We all love that feeling of being the center of attention, especially when it comes to spinning fire, but it's just as important to make sure that you have the backup personnel that you need. You'd be surprised how many small things can go wrong as you're spinning, and it's only by having somebody whose job it is to be there and keep you safe that you can be absolutely certain that you're covering as many bases as possible. Now, there's an obvious question there, and that is, where am I going to find a fire safety spotter? Ideally, this should be somebody who already knows how to spin fire. They know what to look out for, they know what problems you're likely to run into, and they're ready to jump in at a moment's notice. If you happen to live in a place or in a community small enough that you don't have access to somebody else that already knows how to spin fire, then make sure that you can find a friend who's willing to help you out in this way, and make sure that they also take the FAI fire safety course. The preference here is really to work with an experienced professional already, but if that isn't possible, then make sure that you and your safety are both working with the same information, yeah? And hey, if it is your first time being a fire safety spotter for somebody, guess what? I've got an entire video that is going to show you the best ways to put out every prop that you might encounter. I'll go ahead and link to that down in the description. Also, just to put it out there, this is a great way of building a small community. If you and another friend who both want to spin fire trade off being safety spotters for each other, not only does that give you each an opportunity to be able to, try your stuff and everything, but also it's going to instill in both of you the value of how much safetying is really essential for what we do. All right, next up, you're actually going to need a place where you can spin fire. Why is this a separate item? Well, because the requirements for it are actually kind of specific. Number 1, it's going to be really helpful if this is located somewhere that is private property. That way you can make sure that the foot traffic that you're getting through it is minimal. You don't want to be putting anybody else in danger, especially bystanders, as you're working through this. Number 2, it should be someplace that is wide open with minimal overhead cover. Like, you don't want that many trees above you or anything else, like power lines. The reason for this is that your prop can easily get tangled up in these things, and that is going to lead to a bad experience for you as well as your safety spotter, as well as anybody else that has to get involved at that point. And number 3, this should really be a spot where the area around your feet is clear. There should be no obstructions or things that you could easily trip over. You know, parking lots and driveways and even a wide open backyard are all fine, but you want to make sure that there's nothing that could potentially mess with you down below as you're paying attention to what's up high, yeah? So also at this point, I should insert a small proviso because strictly speaking, there may be a question about whether fire spinning is legal where you live. Certainly most of the places that I've visited in the United States will have kind of a live and let live policy in terms of if you're lighting up in your backyard, someplace that is your own space, it is your own property, then the authorities are pretty much content to just live and let live, right? But there are exceptions to that rule, and it's really going to depend on where you happen to be. So make sure that you look up the fire regulations for wherever you happen to live and see what they say about open flames. It may be that, you know, it's no different from having a little campfire set up in your backyard, or it could be that this is a thing that is very much verboten where you live, and you're not going to know that until you look it up. And trust me, you do not want to be on the wrong side of this if you happen to light up and the authorities get involved. So, do your homework here, seriously. Next up, you're going to need the proper equipment. And this is actually a pretty big category in and of itself. The first and most important is that you're gonna need fire props. You know, your practice poi are almost certainly not set up to be lit on fire, and you probably would not be terribly happy with the results of that. Now, some people like to make up their own sets of fire poi, and I did that myself. There's a link to a tutorial as to how down in the description here and everything. But especially in this day and age, it might not be a bad idea with so many companies out there offering really good professional quality equipment that you invest in your first set so that you can be sure that it has been built by a professional with your safety in mind. I've done a few reviews of sets of fire poi sold by companies around the country that I'll go ahead and link to down in the description, but suffice it to say, safer is better than sorry here. Try and go with a more professional option, and if later you decide that you want to make a project out of this, use the knowledge that you've accumulated from your experience to inform the set that you build yourself. Next up, you're going to need fuel. Now, this is one of those cases where I think the best answer for your fuel is going to be found in the Flow Arts Institute Fire Safety course. They have a whole unit in there talking about different fuels and the pros and cons of them and everything. And I think that that's information that you should have before making a choice on what kind of fuel you want to pick up. That said, the most popular fuels here in the United States are naphtha, which is commercially more often known as white gas, camp fuel, or Coleman fuel, sometimes ultra pure lamp oil, sometimes kerosene, but really check with the fire safety course, because that's where the important information that you're going to need to make that decision is going to be found. You're also going to need all the equipment necessary to create a fuel depot, which back in the day used to be called a fuel dump. And I actually created a video that is full of all of the equipment that you need in order to make that happen. The Cliff's Notes are that you need a dip can, which should probably be an empty gallon paint can. You need some Ziploc bags to spin out your fuel into, and it'd be really good also to have a large galvanized bucket to use as a secondary spill container and everything. But really check out that other video because I go into a lot more depth there about it. You're also going to want to have the proper equipment for your fire safety spotter. The things that they are absolutely going to need are going to include a fire safety blanket. This is to put you or your prop out if anything goes wrong. This particular one is from Matrix Fire Safety. I'll go ahead and link to it down in the description. I like these guys because you can get your name embossed on it so it doesn't get mixed up and everything, and you can wash them, which is really, really helpful. It'll also be helpful to have access to a fire extinguisher. Okay, so thus far we have talked about fire safety information, we've talked about having a spotter, we've talked about having an area that is safe to spin fire in, and we've talked about the basic equipment that you're going to need. You may have noticed that I have left a very big thing off the list, and that's because it's the last item that I wanted to cover, and that is, how good do you have to be in order to spin fire? So I will warn you up front that it's going to sound like I am making fire spinning out to be this terrible, horrible thing, but it's really fun, and it is really a rush. I also just want to prepare you for the things that you're not expecting for when it starts up. So here's the thing that nobody else will tell you about spinning fire. Your first time is almost certainly going to be really awkward. You see, all of us just have this built-in mammalian reflex where we see fire close to us and we want to run away from it. We are afraid of the fire because millions of years of evolution have prepared us for the idea that this is a thing that can hurt us. Which of course is a good thing overall because it can hurt you, but it also creates a problem when you try and use it in a controlled fashion. So that first time that you light up, that little reptile brain inside of your head is going to kick on and you are going to completely forget everything that you know how to do with poi. I actually kind of think of this as being analogous to the process that sword swallowers go through. Namely, they have to train themselves to short circuit their gag reflex in order to get a sword down their throat. Learning to be comfortable with fire is no different. So, here's what I can guarantee to you. The first time you spin fire, the second time you spin fire, the third time you spin fire, probably the 10th time you spin fire, that little reptile brain is going to kick on and you're going to forget a lot of what you think you know about poi. And that's totally fine. It's part of the process. All of a sudden, tricks that were as easy and unconscious to you as breathing will suddenly become very difficult and you're going to have to think your way through them. Transitions that, you know, you kind of had them down and everything are all of a sudden going to feel like a math pop quiz from Mars. There's also the problem that when you light up your props for the first time, they're going to be lit for way longer than you think. Seriously, like, it's one thing when you're practicing for a couple hours and you can put down the props for a couple minutes at a time, try a given trick like 2 or 3 times and then take a breather and everything. And it is way different when all of a sudden that prop is on fire and you cannot just put it down in order to forget about it for a couple minutes. All of a sudden, the pressure's on to make all the things happen and make them happen quick. So my advice here, honestly, is that as soon as you can spin your poi without hitting yourself for 5 solid minutes, without putting them down, without having to stop, you're ready to start experimenting with fire. Really, the biggest qualification here is just being willing to do the work of retraining your brain to kind of calm down that reflex to be afraid of fire and everything. Because once you've done that, then all of a sudden, all of the training that you have done with unlit props is going to finally come in handy. But that's a process, and it takes some time. So be patient with yourself. So to review, you know you're ready to spin fire when you have those 5 things in place. You've taken the fire safety course from Flow Arts Institute. You have found a friend or more experienced fire performer to be your safety spotter. You have a private, open, and uncluttered space for you to spin fire in. You've got all the proper equipment that you need in order to be safe. And finally, that you can spin your props for 5 minutes without hitting yourself and without having to think too much about it. That's it. If you've got all of those pieces, guess what? You're ready to start spinning fire. And like, I really do want to emphasize that as much as I have been building up spinning fire as this thing that's going to challenge you in a lot of unexpected ways, it's also something that has really changed my life. And every single time I pick up a fire prop, I'm reminded once again of just how powerful the experience is. And hey, if you are uncomfortable with the idea of diving into that experience at all, there's nothing wrong with that. There are definitely flow artists out there that never spin fire, and you know what? They're just as happy doing it that way. But hey, if you are ready to take the plunge, now you have your 5-item checklist. Go get it, friends. Awesome, and a question out there to the more experienced fire performers. What's something that you wish you had known before you lit up for the first time? Let me know down in the comments. And of course, let me know if I left anything out of this. You know, I definitely have tried my best to make this comprehensive, but you never know when something's gonna slip through. And of course, a huge thank you to my wonderful supporters on Patreon. They make this video and all the videos on this channel possible. And they also made it possible for me to make it through that weird quarantine that we just went through, which I'm really hoping that future me doesn't come back to past me and be all like, you really should not have said that in past tense, but we will see. I'm trying fate right now. If you enjoy these videos that I create and you would like to support me in making more of them, head on over to patreon.com/DrexFactorPoi and sign up. You can get early access to all of my content, as well as the ability to vote and have a say in topics that I tackle in the future. This here video was actually something that was determined by vote on my Patreon. So go check that out, please and thank you. And of course, if you do decide to take the plunge and start spinning fire, I would love to see it. Post videos of your first burn to Instagram and use the hashtag DrexFactorPoi so I can go check it out and see what you're doing. Also, because this is a thing that I really want to have catch on, take photos of the person that is safetying for you. These are usually people that are kind of invisible in our culture, and they're so important, I want them to feel like they're important too. So, shoot some videos, take some photos of your safeties, post them to Instagram. I can't wait to check them out.